Try this one more time with me. That's a melody that I just learned over the past few days. I think it comes from Morocco, and it's set to a 13th century poem called Achot Katana, Little Sister, that's all about letting go of the pain of the previous year and welcoming in the blessings of the new year. I'll have much more to say about that later, and perhaps we can sing some of it together. But for now, I invite all of you to turn to page 2. And there is this beautiful, also early medieval poem by Shlomo ibn Gviro at the top of the page that I think gives words to the sense of tenderness that we approach this moment with, and that gives some voice to at least some of our yearnings tonight. So please feel free to recite these words with me, not as a responsive reading for the sake of just having our voices, but really as a kind of collective meditation, putting on the outside what I know many of us to different degrees are feeling internally. Shalom, shalom to those who are far off, shalom to those who are near, says Adonai. Mighty God who listens to the poor and hears their prayer, how long will you be distant and hidden from me? Night and day I turn, calling out with a true heart, always thanking you for your kindness so great. My sovereign, my hope is in you. My heart trusts in you, as a dreamer of dreams depends on an interpreter. This I ask, hear my prayer. This I seek, not more, not less. I invite you all to stand for Baruch Hu on page 5, and throughout tonight and all these days, as I sing a melody, even if it's new to you, I encourage you to open up your voice and sing along, and that's how we share with each other, one of the powerful ways we share and open up to each other. You take this time to begin these first meditations on Rosh Hashanah with this first bracha. And as I will say, feel free to engage with the traditional words in Hebrew or English, and of course the commentaries on the side of the page. Ma'avir yom mevi laila umavdil ben yom uven laila Adonai tzavaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu la'olam va'ed baruch atah Adonai ay 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 Amariv Aravim. So we turn to page 6. Let's chant Avat Olam together. This bracha before the Shema is itself a meditation on love and sets the kavanah, the spiritual intention for saying Shema, for not only saying, but taking a moment to maybe breathe in and maybe even glimpse and feel the oneness that unites all humanity and all creation. Avat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam voed ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeh yomam valayla. Please join me in this nigun for those words. Ay 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 Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeh yomam valayla ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeh yomam valayla ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem negeh yomam valayla ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu vahem negeh yomam valayla ve'avatcha tasir mimenu olamim baruch ata Adonai ay 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 Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi netzavecha hayom levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. As we turn to page 7, we can take some moments to meditate on the second and third paragraphs of the Shema if we wish. Adonai Elohechem Amen. As we continue our meditations on page 8 and open our minds to the prospect of redemption and liberation from oppression and the emergence of justice, there's a beautiful melody that our leaders, Andy and Janice, have introduced to us on Friday night. And even though it's a departure from the grandeur of the traditional melody of the high holidays, it's call and response, and it helps to bring out our voices. So I hope you'll sing this with me. This is the melody from Micha Mocha on page 8. I'll sing it without the words and then match the words on page 8, which are also transliterated on the left side of the page. Micha Mocha. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Micha Mocha. Ba'elim Adonai Mi kamocha Nedar ba'kodesh Nora Malchutecha ruvanecha bokeh yam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anuv yamru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Gal Yisrael. We turn to page 9 and take some time for our own private meditations on Hashkivenu, which both imagines our greatest vulnerability and within that vulnerability finding a source of surprising spiritual strength. One of the beautiful surprises of this bracha is that during the week it excludes mention of the Sukkot Shalom, of the canopy of Shalom, whereas on Friday nights and on holidays it reintroduces the yearning through the words Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, asking God to spread over us the canopy of Shalom, and I know we're all feeling that yearning in very real ways. But there's an interpretation, a beautiful interpretation from the Zohar, which is a text you'll hear me talk a lot about over the years. And the Zohar, which is the great mystical text from Spain from the 13th century, or 14th century, says something very interesting. We might think that these words suggest that there is our world, and then, as a separate thing, there's the canopy of peace. But the Zohar says, no, the Sukkot Shalom is always there, but we have these moments when our awareness expands and we become conscious of the presence of the Sukkot Shalom, the canopy of Shalom, enveloping us, living in our lives at all times. So I invite you to enter this thought space, this prayer space with me. We'll take a few quiet moments for Hashkivenu on page 9. Hashkivenu Adonai Shalom. ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני איי 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 Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Val Kol Amo Yisrael, V'al Yerushalayim. As we turn to page 10, we take a moment to sing and take into our minds these words from the Psalms, Tik'u b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu. Sound the tikiyah on the new month, sound the tikiyah with the shofar in the new month, b'kesel yom chagenu, on this day of our festival. And this word keseh is very interesting because technically all it means is the new month. But it bears a surprising resemblance to the word in Hebrew for kasa, kisa, to cover. And so that's absolutely irresistible to the rabbis, that this new month that we enter right now in this new year, for right now, its meanings, its surprises, its blessings are concealed. And we begin this new year in concealment, working throughout the year to bring to light all of our aspirations, our dreams, our ability to bring kindness and goodness to each other. So I invite you to stand and we'll chant this verse together at the top of page 10. Tiku v'chodesh shofar b'kesed yom chagenu ki Yisrael hu mishpat lelohei Yaakov. Yitkadash merabah be'alma divrach yiruteh ve'yamlich malchuteh b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayedcho beit Yisrael ba'gala uv'izman karif v'imru Amen. Yesh merabah mevorach le'olam ul'al me'al maya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalal shmed kodesha berichu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran bi'alma b'meru amen. Take some time while we're standing with the silent Amidah, pages 11 through 16. Please feel free to take the time you need and let your mind wander to the commentary on the side. This Amidah introduces us to the themes of the high holidays, which we'll delve into much more tomorrow. And I invite you to take this time to dwell in the silent tefillah, in the silent prayer. Page 11.
Sefer Chaim beracha v'shalom ufarnasa tova nizacher v'nikatev lefanecha anachnu v'chol amecha beit Yisrael l'chaim tovim u'leshalom.
We're on page 19.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah Be'alma divrach irute ve'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayedecho beit Yisrael ba'gala u'v'zman kari ve'immeru amen Yeshmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya Barach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpar ve'yitromam ve'yitnase ve'yitadar ve'yitale ve'yitalal shemeir kudesha berichu le'ela mikol birchata ve'shirata tushbechata ve'nechamata damiran be'alma ve'imru amen Titkabel tzalotahon uvahotahon dechol Yisrael kodam avuhon di vishmaya ve'immeru amen Yehesh tamar rabba min shamaya v'chayim alinu v'yal kol Yisrael ay 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 Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. Ay 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 ay
This isn't water, this is kiddush. I'm going to set it over here for just a minute. Something occurred to me I thought I would check in with everyone, and it might seem so small, but I think it's such a key to the potential of these days, and also some of the struggle. In the Kaddishes that we said, either the Chatzi Kaddish before the Amidah or the Kaddish Shalem after, did you notice anything different about those Kaddishes? Anyone can call out. What's that? Le'ela, le'ela. Exactly, right? In a typical Kaddish that's not the high holidays, we say le'ela, and on high holidays we say le'ela, le'ela. Now what is le'ela? Le'ela is lamala in Hebrew. It's an Aramaic word. It means going upward. And on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and for the 10 days in between, it's upward and upward. We double it. And so there's a kind of transcendence that we come to expect with this holiday. And that transcendence, I think, inherently lives in tension with how our tradition thinks of this holiday. I remember the first time I went to teach Hebrew school, and I was the worst Hebrew school teacher ever. Not that I was mean, I was just incompetent. And trust me, I've never seen other Hebrew school teachers as incompetent as I was at the age of 21. But nevertheless, at the first meeting we had, someone threw out a great trivia question. This is 1991, excuse me. A person said, what are 3 different names for Rosh Hashanah? And I thought, well, there's Rosh Hashanah. And then someone who was really smart said, well, there's Yom Teruah, right, the sound of the shofar. There's Yom Hadin, the day of judgment, and Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. And if we think of the emotional cluster of all of these experiences, and especially this year, who are we remembering? What is the fear that we have of limitations, of real judgments in the world? Where are the possibilities for transcendence? Where is the opening for kindness? Where are the surprising sources of strength? It reminds me how Rosh Hashanah is not just one experience, it never is one experience, but kind of a cluster of contradictory experiences and yearnings. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. And I want to talk a little bit about my struggle as we're coming, my struggle, by which I mean our collective struggle, as we come into this day and how we make use of this day and this season. And I've been thinking actually of my cantor in high school in these days, because he really impressed me. He was a very sensitive, thoughtful person, a wonderful musician, and he had this ability to sing in such a way that was impressive, that got you to take notice, but was also soft and invited you in. And it occurred to me tonight, perhaps one of the reasons I'm thinking of my cantor is because I came to sing in the synagogue choir in my synagogue in Long Island literally 40 years ago today. It was the summer I came back from my first trip to Israel, and I was just so open and excited and brimming with this desire to draw closer to this tradition and learn more. Believe it or not, I actually wanted to read Josephus Flavius, the Jewish chronicler who sided with the Romans. That didn't happen. I found more interesting things to get involved with. But the synagogue choir brought me close to my cantor. And it helped me see that for him, tefillah, and particularly the high holidays, was really about showing for everyone and embodying himself this yearning, this open yearning. And so I want to just give words to some of the things that I'm yearning for this year that I imagine many of us, if not all of us, are yearning for. I yearn for a return of the hostages, beginning of healing for them and for their families, and for all families and friends who've lost loved ones a year ago on October 7th and this year. I yearn for the end of a war and wars, and God forbid a war to come, and the untold destruction on tens and thousands of civilian lives in their wake. I yearn for a comprehensive political settlement, a phrase that sounds so sterile, but actually brings new life to millions and millions of people. For Israelis, for Palestinians, for all who live in the Middle East. I yearn for a restoration of empathy and compassion and rational understanding in our public discourse. Not for me necessarily, but for the next generation. Because I remember what it was like to come of awareness as a teenager and realize how not on this planet the adults in power seem to be. And then there are the personal yearnings which I carry, that I know we all carry, inherent in our personal stories of grief and loss and pain and concern, and hopefully of burgeoning healing and possibility as well, and we all have them. And what struck me as I started to catalog these yearnings for myself is that I realized they're not a utopian fantasy. None of them are. They're all very real world yearnings. And they're what we pray for in different ways, year after year. And I'm struck particularly this year about how Rosh Hashanah greets these yearnings with great poetry and great beauty and great transcendence. Over these days, you'll hear me wax poetic as much as I can about how these days are considered by our tradition as Hayom Harat Olam, literally the day in which the earth reveals, the universe reveals its capacity to ongoingly renew itself. And that the poetry of these days, at least in my experience, can fill us with such a sense of the inherent beauty of this world that it gives us a backdrop to go to the darker aspects of human nature and of ourselves and the ways in which we haven't shown up in our best ways, and gives us the courage to go to someone else and make tshuva, and so that we emerge at the end of Yom Kippur, not necessarily with a fully clean slate, there's no such thing, but with joy and strength to greet the world and its challenges, the personal and the communal and the political and the moral and everything. But I have to ask myself really quite honestly, with the pain that we feel, the pain that I feel, the pain that we know is in this world, how appropriate is it to fully embrace this poetic beauty? I often think of Leonard Cohen at this time of year, who in 2016 came out with his last album, his last single, famously called You Want It Darker? And I'd say to Leonard Cohen, no, I really don't want it darker. But then if all I see is what's palatable, if all I see is what's light, then I have to ask myself, well, what is it that I'm really seeing? And so I ask myself this question coming to Rosh Hashanah: how much can I revel in the beauty that Rosh Hashanah gives us? And by reveling in that beauty, am I turning away from the very real pain that exists? But actually, I've been struggling with this for a month, and the whole month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And what I found were that in all of the texts and rituals, or I should say so many, and the liturgy, and throughout this Machzor, there are so many examples of being invited to grapple with both. To grapple with the pain, and to grapple with more than the pain. To let that in as well. And I found the examples so compelling, and so multiple, and so persuasive, that I thought to start off tonight, I'd share a couple of them with you, in the hopes that they take room, they take up space in our consciousness and help guide us over these days as they've guided me. So for several years now, this is the first one, I've really been taken by a text that ends one of our Talmudic tractates, and it begins at a time of great despair and disillusionment, and ends with the embrace of the real possibility of the emergence of new life. And it's from the tractate Ta'anit, which deals with fasts, and the fast of all fasts, not necessarily Yom Kippur, but the bummer fasts of all bummer fasts in our tradition, of course, is Tisha B'Av. And you may be familiar with this holiday. It's a holiday that the rabbis essentially invented, because the rabbis 2,000 years ago lived in the shadow of the greatest catastrophe they could have ever imagined, which was the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And so they had to find out some way to live in this new reality, the destruction of their sacred center, and that the Romans still dominated every aspect of their lives. Not just in terms of their physical presence, but morally and even spiritually. So how are they going to deal with this? And so the holiday of Tisha B'Av concentrates all the disasters of the Jewish people that the rabbis could think of into one day of fasting and lamentation, until it becomes the day on which to commemorate the destruction of the Second Temple of Jerusalem in 70 CE, the First Temple in 586 BCE by the Babylonians, and even that moment in the Torah when the people are at the edge of the land and they don't go in and the generation is sentenced to die in the desert. That moment in the Torah is also attributed by the rabbis to Tisha B'Av. Now, the rabbis themselves, living in the 2nd, 3rd century CE, they could have gone apocalyptic. They could have said, there is no hope and the end is nigh. But they didn't go there. They chose to see a world beyond the pain. And in this particular section of this tractate that I'm talking about, the first thing they take note of is the state of nature in the land of Israel around the time of Tisha B'Av. They point out that at this moment of greatest lamentation and mourning, the sun is blazing at its hottest, the days are their longest, but then, they note, something very interesting happens. The nights get longer, offering the luxury of cool evenings. Dew collects more in the morning, and there's this sense of promise of a new beginning. The rabbis actually note that after Tisha B'Av, the dew would become so plentiful that the wood choppers who would go into the forest and chop down trees to feed the sacrificial fires of the temple that had to burn each day, they didn't bring the wood that they chopped down right to the temple. They'd have to put it in storage and let it dry out and then bring it to the temple. And then they take note of changes in the ritual calendar. On the 9th of Av is the day of greatest lamentation. 6 days later, it's a little cooler, it's a little wetter, and that's the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av, which the rabbis understood to be the day of the greatest courtship ritual in the ancient world, where women would gather in a circle, everyone, rich and poor, would wear all white, women would loan dresses to each other so you couldn't tell who was rich and who wasn't, and they would attract suitors by reminding them beauty is temporary and charm is vain. Look to the inner spiritual qualities. By the way, the same ritual was repeated at the end of Yom Kippur. And so the rabbis have this sense that with the change in the natural world, so our outlook should change. And at the beginning of Elul, that becomes a time for reflection precisely because we both feel this emerging love corresponding to the sense of promise in the natural world. And then it's against this background of great love and new possibility that we enter Rosh Hashanah. So now let's make a little bit of room for skepticism. I love this text, but we have to ask hard questions of it and of our tradition. Our times, they're so different. The capacities that we see in people are so startling. The damage that we can do to each other, it's unthinkable. Can we really take these innocent texts from 2,000 years ago and have them live for us? I think it's an important argument. But I would counter that by saying, although the technology 2,000 years ago was very different, the rabbis very clearly understood the human heart and the ways of human society. And as much as they dreamed of a new world, as much beauty as they saw in the world, they saw it knowing full well what human beings are capable of, because they either experienced it or had a memory, only a generation or two old, of the Roman Empire, the most ruthless empire in the ancient world. But the rabbis do something else, and you'll see this on almost every page of this Machzor. They not only give us transcendent poetic visions of what this world in our own time can be, even though we might not think it's possible, they give us something else. They couch the relationship between human beings and God at this time of year as one of argument. Now that might feel a little bit strange because how often have we come to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and read the Machzor and looked over at the English and been disappointed that it's all about supplication and feeling not as great as God is and whatever. That actually covers something up, which is that there's a spirit of argument through this, which grounds us in our lives, and by grounding us in our lives, therefore opens up the spiritual possibilities. And so we see on the first page of the Mishnah on Rosh Hashanah from 2,000 years ago that yes, there's this scene of a divine judgment of humanity. But at the same time, what human beings are doing is we are acting as our own defense attorneys and presenting the case in minute detail of how good we actually are despite all evidence and how much we can do. But most importantly, and this comes up in every service in our Machzor, that we as Jews and we as people, we've suffered too much. We've had more than our share of suffering, and so we are entitled, not wanting or deserving, entitled to the compassion that God promised that God would give us in the Torah. Not only that, but we retreat to a pretty good negotiating strategy, which is to say to God in the Machzor, we don't want everything. We just want 1 year of life. And then we'll come back the next year and ask for it again, but we just want that 1 year. And so the argument opens up the possibility that there is more that we can do to sweeten our world, to make it more soft, and to make it more whole. We'll see the voices of Moses and of Job and of Hannah all throughout this Machzor, demanding that compassion. One of the things that happened for me in Elul, and it happened right through the hours before I came here this evening, is I found 2 lines in the Machzor that every year that I've been working with this Machzor, it's probably now about 15 years or so, I overlooked. And what it was just 2 lines from a poem from the 13th century called Achot Katana, Little Sister. I'll say a little bit more about that in a few moments. But one line said, let the pain of this previous year be done. And the next line is, let the blessings of the new year begin. Lovely words. But I dove into the rabbit hole and I investigated this. And I did what I don't like to do, which is to go on Facebook. And it turns out this year, every rabbi, every Hebraically knowledgeable Jew and their third cousin is posting quotations from this poem written in the 13th century. It's not like some big Jewish singer like Matisyahu recorded it. No, it's kind of obscure unless you're super knowledgeable about this stuff. And yet it's out there. And so I think right now we're part of this collective yearning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Achot Katana, and then I'm going to have us sing it. I actually distributed it. Well, I don't have to sing all of it, but I distributed it. And Achot Katana comes from the image, the little sister, comes from the last chapter of the Song of Songs. And the little sister can mean a number of different possibilities. It could be all of us. We are the little sister of God in the metaphor. It could be the human soul. That's the younger sister. It could also be part of God. It could be the Shekhinah. It could be God's presence that dwells with human beings in exile and is always vulnerable, and her strength waxes and wanes with the moon. And if you read the English and don't look too closely, it'll feel very 13th century, very abject, very really centering suffering. But if you know a little bit of the Hebrew and are willing to look at the English with a little bit more expansiveness, we see something very interesting. That the little sister isn't only vulnerable to the powers that are around her, she's tough. She withstands those powers. She presents her case before God, like a great defense attorney working for the poor pro bono. She calls God on God's absence. Why do you turn your eyes away from me? And finally, by the end of the poem, emerges with real strength. The entitled little sister opens a life that we, in partnership with the eternal, can see ourselves bringing about as we bring forth blessings in this world. And so, as we all struggle at this moment for all the different reasons that we bring, I guess my humble hope is that in this community that we can draw on each other, on our openness and our wisdom and our commitment to share our wisdom and our sources of spiritual strength to find renewed joy and hope in the work ahead. Shana Tova. So I printed out the piyut, this poem of Achot Katana, and there are, if you don't see one right in front of you, you can look a couple of rows in front, look to the back. I think there actually should be enough for everybody. You can also turn to page 22 in this Machzor, and you can see the 2 lines in Hebrew and transliterated into English. And it's the same melody that I sang at the beginning. And my thought is we would sing some of the verses. We don't have to sing every one, but we'll sing maybe the first 2 or 3 and then the very last one. And then I'm going to recite this prayer, which I invite you to do with me, that our Machzor has to bring in this new year, 5,785 years young. I'll start with the Nigun. Please join me, and then we'll start singing the first couple of verses, and I'll tell you when we sing the last verse. And again, I'm channeling the great spirit of Pete Seeger, who is in Beacon, to say, even if you don't know the melody, even if you don't know the words, even if you don't think you can sing, it doesn't matter, because when you open your voice and sing, you share that spark and that yearning with everyone around you, and that's really my goal for bringing us all together. Okay. Please feel free to chant this with me. Ay 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 da 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 ay 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 achot ketana tefilo teha orcha ve'ona tehilo teha elna refana lemachaloteha tichle shana ve'kilelo teha beno amilim lecha tikra'e ve'shir ve'ilulim ki lecha na'e ad matalim eincha ve'tir'e zarim ochalim nachaloteha tichle shana ve'kileloteha re'et tzoncha arayot zarum ushvoch charoncha be'omrim aru v'chanad yemincha parzu v'yaru lo hishiru ololoteha tichle shana ve'kileloteha. Last verse. Chizku ve'gilu ki shod gamar letzur hochilu berito shamar lachem v'talu letzion ve'amar solu solu mesiloteha tachel shana uvirchoteha tichle shana v'kileloteha. May this year's troubles end. Tachel shana uvirchoteha, and a year of blessing begin. Please join me in this collective meditation, this collective proclamation of the new year on page 23, that it should be a bracha for all of us. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, that the year 5,785 be one of balanced and mindful growth for us
as individuals, for our families, and our communities. May we return next year in good health and an appreciation of a year of greater peace, a year in which we deepened our lives through learning and the performance of mitzvot, a year in which we were conscious of the divine presence, a year in which we strengthened our shared commitment to tikkun olam, to the betterment of the world. And to sanctify and bring some joy to this bracha, on top of the joy and the holiness that we bring, please stand and join me for Kiddush on page 24. Please join me in singing Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'romamanu mikol hashon v'kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava et yom hazikaron hazeh yom truah mikra kodesh zecher l'yetziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim udvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad. Baruch atah Adonai melech al kol ha'aretz mekadesh Yisrael lech aretz mekadesh Yisrael melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Chaim tovim va'arukim, for good and long life. Continue with Aleinu, page 25. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol l'teinu l'yotzer bereshit shelo asanu kiboyei ha'aratzot v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו כמו המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך עולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד Please be seated. Turn to page 27, and one of the great, lovely coincidences in this book Page 27 has on it Psalm 27, which we recite from every day from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Elul through the end of Sukkot. And I'd like to give us the space to take some time with the words of this psalm. There's a fluctuation in the psalm. There are times when the psalmist feels so close to God as the source of their spiritual strength, and other times when he feels utterly lost and abandoned. And perhaps that evokes associations within us. I'm going to chant the nigun, the melody for Achat Sha'alti, which is in the middle of the page, bold in Hebrew and transliterated in English. I invite you to sing it with me and chant the words if you wish. Ay, 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 Shivti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai lachazot benoam benoam Adonai ulevaker bechalu lachazot benoam benoam Adonai ulevaker bechalu. If you're in mourning or observing Yartzeit or have taken on the mitzvah of saying Mourner's Kaddish for someone, Mourner's Kaddish is on page 26. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'alama divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayed chol beit Yisrael ba'agalav v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'me'amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei kudusha b'richu le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata damiran b'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah amin shemaya b'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mrama hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Shana Tova, everyone. I want to just express some gratitude, and I know I'm going to miss someone, so please forgive me. But just most immediately to Jesse and the whole security team for making sure that being in this building and being together and so public also feels good and feels safe, and that we can be confident in being here together and joining together as a Jewish community. I want to thank Laura Liebeck-Smith for arranging all these wonderful Torah readers and honors and people who are going to carry us tomorrow, and Faith, our administrator, and so many people, and I hope to thank them all more by name as these holidays go on. But most of all, I want to express how truly, truly blessed and grateful I feel to be here in this community. The people who I was able to speak to, some of whom are in this room right now, from the moment we talked, they were so open-hearted and thoughtful and believe in the strength and the vitality of BHA. And since coming here and talking to people, everyone has been so interesting and open-hearted and thoughtful, and there is so much dynamism and vitality here that even with the struggle that I alluded to about what does it mean to come into the high holidays, I am truly very, very excited to see what it is that we build here together, the healing we do in our community, throughout the community, the joy and the wisdom that we can surface through what we do together. And now it's just starting. And so speaking of that, tomorrow we begin at 9 o'clock. I'd actually encourage you to come for the whole thing. It'll be fun and cool. And I promise, and I'm going to move it along, but I'll tell you why. Because for me, right, we each have our things that makes real tefillah prayer. For me, it's the first bet of Birkot HaShachar, those first morning blessings. But then, at the Torah service, it's really going to be, in its own way, I'm anticipating a real celebration of community as different people come to chant the different aliyot, who come up for the blessings, who come in to participate and make it all happen. And people who've served, given of themselves as presidents, will be here and helping it happen. And it's really going to be quite beautiful. So I look forward to seeing you then. And then at 4 o'clock tomorrow, we'll gather at Long Dock Park for Tashlich. And here's what's really cool. We have a new 8th grader sounding the shofar, not during the service tomorrow. She's not ready for that yet. But at Tashlich, so that will be super cool, and then Friday, second day, but we'll get to that tomorrow. For now, why don't we finish with Yigdal on page 28. I must say that I kind of wanted to, Spotify is amazing. You get a song that you like and you can play it over and over again. But I have a feeling we'll return to this beautiful piyut, Achot Katana. But let's close with Yigdal now on page 28. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach nimtza v'yenet el metziuto echad v'yen yachid keyichudo ne'lam v'gam ein sof le'achduto eino dmut haguf v'yeino guf lo na'roch elav kedushato קדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא, ראשון ואין ראשית בראשיתו. הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר, יורק גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו, אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד, נביא ומביט את תמונתו, תורת אמת נתן מהמוהל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו. לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו. צופה ויודע סתרנו, מביט בסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומל איש חסד כמפעלו, נותן רשע רע כרישתו. ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, וחכה קץ ישועתו. מתים יחייאל ברוב חסדו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו. מתים יחייאל ברוב חסדו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו. L'shana tova tikatevu v'techatemu. May we all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life. Shana tova. And see you tomorrow morning.